everybody, and welcome to AI People. Today we're talking to Douwe Kiela, who is the CEO at Contextual AI, which is an end-to-end RAG platform for enterprise companies. Greetings, Douwe.
Hi, thanks for having me.
No problem. So we always kick off every show by asking for a few predictions about the kind of AI market as a whole. I know people love making predictions about AI, but I think it's interesting just to talk to leaders and kind of see what their views are on some of these questions. So the first one is, how do you see humans and AI collaborating with regard to work in 5 years' time and in 15 years' time?
15 years time is way too far away to make any serious predictions. I think maybe even 5 is very difficult. But I always say that I'm a techno optimist. I think when it comes to AI, where obviously it's very disruptive technology, is going to change a lot of people's lives. So basically, everybody's lives are going to be changed. But the opportunity, I think, is that it will give us really a lot of time to be much more social and much more human. So instead of doing a lot of the boring things that we're doing right now and a lot of the kind of mundane activities that we're doing, we're able to go one level of abstraction higher. And so, writing that boring report, like, we don't have to do that anymore. AI will do it for us, but we still need to do something with that report and talk to other humans about it. So I think there's an interesting kind of shift coming in the next 5 years, I think, when it comes to just how people do work.
So you think there'll be more of a focus on us doing the human things, or the things that we do really well, like making or building relationships and having that kind of human contact, but we won't be doing the kind of mundane tasks?
Yeah, exactly. And so the required skill, I think, is kind of social interaction skills, distinctly human social skills, and the ability to articulate very precisely what you want, because that is what you will use to tell AI precisely what you want. And so those are really the two core skills, I think.
Yeah. Okay. And how close do you think we are to AGI? You can kind of put your own definition on that, but do you think it's something that we're getting close to, or still the perennial kind of 20 years away?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I was on this panel on AGI with Gary Marcus at the Web Summit recently in Vancouver. And so he's very famous for kind of being an AGI detractor and saying that it's all kind of overblown, basically. But I think for me, there are two camps. One is like AGI is around the corner, and the other camp is AGI will never happen, or we need like fundamental breakthroughs. And I guess I'm in the third camp, which is who cares? It's like AI is already super useful. It's going to continue to get even more useful. And so I think that's fundamentally what matters, not whether it's sort of like, really generally intelligent, however you define that. Or some people have these kind of very, very broad definitions for AGI, where it's essentially like artificial consciousness. And I don't think AI needs to be conscious to be useful. I think you can be very useful and intelligent without being conscious. So that's kind of the preamble, I guess, because if you look at the definition of AGI, at least how it's given on OpenAI's website. So they have an ethical charter on their website, which was actually written by the people who are now at Anthropic. They give a pretty precise definition of AGI, where it's around AI being able to do most economic activities at a level better than humans. And so the key word there is most, right? Like, what does that even mean? Like, maybe is that like 51% or I don't know what the exact definition is there. So I think if you follow that definition, where AI is doing economically useful tasks better than humans, then we're very close. Maybe we're already there. Actually, if you look at it like that, right? Because the capabilities exist to do it. It's much more around how we turn it into a useful product now, and how do we actually like apply the core technological building blocks to solve the problems that we need to solve. But a lot of the core building blocks are already there. But maybe that's an even more contentious answer. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're the first person to say that. So I guess, we could kind of get to a point where AI is becoming more and more useful in terms of different products that we're working with. And we almost just forget thinking about AGI because it's like, well, we don't really need that anyway, because we've already got all
Yeah,
these
who
other
cares?
systems which
Right?
are kind of doing, different things. So.
Yeah. So I think like if you're a little bit cynical about all the AGI stuff, it's marketing from both sides. So on the one side, it's sort of like, oh, like our technology is so advanced, it's general, and it's AGI, and like we have to be very afraid of it. And on the other side, it's also just marketing around, what those people are trying to achieve. So I think people should stop debating that so much and look much more at the actual technology and the real implications that are going to happen from us having that technology, and whether there's AGI or not, those implications are very real.
Yeah, sure. And that kind of leads on to the next kind of prediction. So just thinking about kind of wealth inequality and the global economy, like, do you think wealth inequality is going to get much worse, or do you think we're going to kind of narrow the gaps in opportunity and actually kind of lift everybody up?
Yeah, I hope it's not going to get any worse. At least where I am in the US, it's already pretty bad, I think. Yeah, it's very hard to make any predictions on that. My hope for the technology is that if we're careful to make sure that it's really that it exists for everyone and that everybody can use it, then it could be a very great equalizer, essentially, because everybody has access to the same tools and the same underlying technology to achieve what they need to achieve.
Okay, but still kind of open question on that one then.
Yeah, I mean, there will be significant economic disruption in the next couple of years. But interestingly, a lot of that disruption might happen in the sort of upper layers, sort of the white collar jobs rather than the blue collar jobs, right? So maybe that's also a way to equalize.
Yeah, sure. So robots are still harder than kind of software and technology.
Yeah. So I saw this interesting stat, I guess that's relevant to your audience as well, that CS grads, computer science graduates, are also actually struggling to get jobs right now because there's a lot of AI kind of getting used, and so the existing developers are a lot more efficient. And so that's something I would worry about if I was, going to school now.
Kind of starting all over again. Yeah. Okay. So just before we get into Contextual, do you want to just give us an overview of kind of yourself, like your background? I'm kind of interested in what took you from studying kind of AI and philosophy in Utrecht to being kind of at the heart of the kind of AI transformation in enterprise companies.
Yeah. So as you said, I did my undergrad in Utrecht. I'm from the Netherlands originally. So yeah, my journey is I kind of timed it well. I think I did my PhD in Cambridge in a field called natural language processing, which at the time wasn't very exciting, and it turned out to become pretty important. So after my PhD, I joined Facebook AI Research. So really, as a pure AI researcher, my kind of claim to fame as a researcher is that I'm one of the co-inventors of RAG, retrieval augmented generation, among other things. Then after FAIR, I went to Hugging Face, was the head of research there for a year, and then started this company, Contextual AI, 2 years ago, to really focus on making Gen AI work for enterprises on their data. And the way you make Gen AI work on your data is through RAG or some version of RAG. And so that's really what we're focused on. We're an end-to-end platform for building RAG applications and agents that are very high quality, and you can build them very quickly.
So I've seen you describe current RAG setups as being Frankenstein's monster. What do you see as being broken in the kind of typical enterprise RAG setup today?
Yeah, so the Frankenstein, I think, is a really nice analogy here, or the monster, I should say, not Frankenstein. But if you look at a RAG system, it is a system, right? It's not just a model. So a language model is really just a small part of this very complex system that involves having to extract the right information from documents, then making sure that you chunk that in the right way, that you encode it in the right way using embeddings, that you put it in the vector database in the right way, then you do re-ranking. And so these are extremely complex systems. And if you take components that were not really designed to work well together, then you're obviously going to get worse performance. So another way to say this is, these are compound systems. So the errors cascade. If you have something wrong in the beginning, you can never get it right at the end. So you can have an amazing language model, but if you didn't extract the right information for that language model to do its job, then it doesn't work. So the performance compounds over the different components. And so we really started the company from that observation. It's like we always need to think about this in terms of systems and make sure that all the components are best in class, but that they're also trained to work well together. And if you do that, you get more accurate RAG systems with lower hallucination, better attribution, and really tackling the challenges that enterprises have around RAG technology.
And you've called Contextual RAG 2.0. Like what does that mean in practice for kind of people using the platform?
So in practice, it just means better performance. And so, we had to find a way to kind of distinguish our approach to RAG from kind of what the rest of the market was doing with these Frankenstein solutions. And so that's why we coined the term RAG 2.0. But the core observation is just that if you use our RAG, then it should work better out of the box. So you don't have to do as much tuning, essentially, to get to the level where you need to go. Out of the box, it already will work very good, and then you can really specialize it to get maximum performance for the use cases you care about.
And you decided to kind of build a full stack kind of end-to-end platform, like rather than kind of partnering with other companies or like integrating with other apps out there. So what was the kind of decision making there?
Yeah, so the platform, I think, is really the big opportunity right now, right? So if you look at the first wave of very successful AI companies outside of the like infrastructure providers like OpenAI and Anthropic, but really just kind of the wave that came after that, like your Harveys and companies like that. They are very good at building these verticalized applications where they solve for a specific vertical and they kind of go all the way to the end user. So it's really good that these companies are doing so well. But if you look at a large enterprise, they don't have like 5 problems and like 5-point solutions. They have like 10,000 problems, and they're not going to buy separate point solutions for each problem. Right, so they what they need to have is a platform where they can very quickly build those point solutions themselves, and that's really the bigger opportunity in the AI market right now, and that's what we're looking at.
And how much value do you think enterprises are leaving on the table by sticking with like a more generic RAG pipeline? Is there a way to put a number on that?
Yeah, I mean, so it's not just about like leaving value on the table. It's more like spending money and energy on the wrong things. So you can build your own RAG system, and it will probably be pretty good if you have a couple of documents and if you have a well understood use case, and if it's not too difficult. But in the real world, those 3 things are almost never true, right? So you usually have large quantities of extremely noisy, conflicting data with complex layouts that's all over the place. And then you have lots of different use cases, and the most valuable ones also tend to be the most difficult ones. So in those scenarios, RAG is not easy anymore, and you can't just cobble that together with some open source components and count on everything just working out of the box. So that's really where we come in, and where we help people not just get higher accuracy, but also just save time and save very scarce resources. So AI engineers saving their time and energy on things that actually matter, which is delivering differentiated value, not just figuring out the optimal chunking strategy.
Yeah, sure. And when you're talking to enterprise companies, do you still see them being overly fixated on like the size of the model that they're using, or the particular model that they're using, rather than the structure of that system that you were alluding to before?
Yeah, I think the market is very interesting. It's just very broad, very diverse. So some companies are already way past that point, and others are really just getting started, and just some of them are just discovering RAG. So it's really very, very diverse, which I think is interesting from a technology perspective, because everybody kind of wants to be at the frontier, but a lot of the sort of easier problems that where you can have big impact very quickly are more on the other side of the spectrum.
And I guess that's related a little bit to the kind of the technical skills that they have in the organization. Is that right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So that's also kind of changing, right? Like when I was doing my PhD, like there was no such thing as an AI developer or AI engineer. You were just a developer or an engineer.
There's a few out there now. Yeah.
Yeah. But and so now, like, you know, when I was interviewing, I had to like write like backprop out on the whiteboard, you know, and so it was very different times where it was about being an ML engineer and deeply understanding kind of the underlying theory. Right now, an AI developer is really just somebody who is very good at stitching together API calls. And I don't mean that in a bad way, right? That just means that the technology is becoming much more accessible, which is really awesome, I think. But that means that there are lots of developers now who can build these demos themselves, which is really good. But it's still very, very difficult to build these systems out for production, especially when you have lots of use cases. So the degree of sophistication is actually it's interesting where I think on the kind of less sophisticated end of the spectrum, there's a little bit of Dunning-Kruger, where people think that they know everything and then you know, they don't. But that's kind of a journey of discovery that you just have to go through. So that kind of learning, I think, is also just very important for companies. So I always encourage companies that whatever you do, don't do nothing. Don't just wait. You have to get started.
Try and kind of make things better and learn from mistakes. Because I've seen you talk about that before, like that the gap of kind of the promise of AI and the kind of disconnect of kind of the ROI that companies are seeing. Like what do you think like the biggest cause of that disconnect is? Is it different in every company, or like, you know, is there kind of one core lesson that companies can try and learn from?
Yeah, I think there are lots of lessons actually. Like one is really focus on the production use case if that's where you get the ROI. So very often we see people building for the demo and then they make a decision that they want to productionize it and then they find out that they can't, or that it's actually much more complex to do that and that, you know, it's not robust enough to actually be useful in production. So then you've wasted a lot of resources on that. So that's another reason why you want to move fast. But so in terms of ROI, I think like the gap between demo and production is a big one. Integrating AI into the right place. So very often, if it's kind of a separate thing, then it's very hard for people to change how they work. So ideally, you integrate the AI into sort of processes that already exist in the company so that you make it really accessible to people sort of directly in what they're doing anyway. And then, the big one around ROI, I think, is around people not being ambitious enough. So it's very easy to buy like an internal kind of search, like enterprise search, for example, like a Copilot or a Glean or something like that. It's like you're never going to get fired for bringing that in, which is great because now you have AI and like you were responsible for bringing AI into the company. But at the same time, there is very little value from being able to ask that AI system, like, who is our 401k provider? Like I could have just searched that, like using old school search methods. I didn't need AI to tell me that, right? So the real value of AI and the real ROI comes from these much more ambitious use cases that are much more difficult. And so, you know, those are the use cases that we focus on. And very often we see people kind of aim too low, where they're just not ambitious enough. And then it's just very hard to get real ROI from it. You need to be ambitious and solve hard problems.
It feels like it's quite like a nuanced thing, like to every company in terms of how you deliver these programs to kind of get that ROI. And there's a big sort of change management element to it and a big sort of project management element to it, which all feels like very human kind of skills that kind of companies need to kind of deliver these projects effectively. Would that be right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, so I think out of this whole AI boom, like there are I think two companies that have made a lot of money so far. One is the kind of infrastructure builders, so your OpenAIs and Anthropics and Googles and others, and then the other group are the consulting companies. So and sort of the systems integrators, right? So your Accentures and your McKinseys, and so they have really benefited from this revolution so far because like you said, there's a lot of project management and change management that needs to happen around adapting this technology. And if you don't do that right, you can have amazing technology, but it's never actually going to succeed in getting you ROI.
And is that like almost a different type of role that's going to appear in these companies, like someone who's got like very strong kind of business acumen, but then can marry that together with a good understanding of the technology and its potential and what you can, what problems you can solve with it?
Yeah, I don't know if that's a different role than what it used to be. I think that's generally what consultants are good at, is kind of taking the technology and making sure that it's used in the right way, in the right place to get the right sort of outcome.
Okay, so just thinking about kind of broader AI industry, like I've seen you say that observability is more important than accuracy. Can you just kind of unpack that, and what does that mean in a practical sense for kind of AI teams?
Yeah, I don't know if it's more important, but it's definitely the case that accuracy is sort of table stakes at this point. So if you have 95% accuracy, or 90 something percent, like that's kind of expected at this point. But then the real question, especially if you're working in a regulated industry, is not like, okay, 95% is great. It's like, what about the 5% that we still get wrong, right? What are we going to do there? So you can build in a lot of safeguards around potential mistakes. So you can, so those are things we have in our platform, right? We provide bounding box attributions in the source material so that you can double check directly in the source whether the generation is correct. We have a separate model that decomposes the generation. So the answer basically that the system gives, it decomposes it into individual claims, and then it verifies these claims independently. So that if there is some inadvertent mistake or hallucination, then it's kind of caught in the second stage that checks for the groundedness essentially in the source material. So there's all kinds of things that you can build into modern RAG pipelines to make sure that you have observability kind of across the board, so that even if you get it wrong, you have sort of mechanisms in place to mitigate that. And so with that obviously comes sort of monitoring and audit trails and those types of things.
And again, do you think that's important to have that all in the same system rather than, a lot of companies out there kind of bolting, maybe an observability tool together with a different development tool that they're using?
Yeah, I don't think it necessarily has to be in the same system. So we also make it possible for people to kind of export that to their own observability systems, right? We can't be the platform that does everything as much as I would like to be that. That's going to take some time. But I think maybe the core is that if you have that observability and if you know how to evaluate your systems, then you also know how to improve them. So it's like, measurement of the system gives you a signal on how to improve it. And so if you have those two things very closely coupled, they don't necessarily have to be in the same platform, but they can be, then you can just iterate much more quickly and get to the higher performance that you need to get into production, for example.
Yeah, okay. And just going back to kind of delivering successful projects, I saw you talk previously about like the spark and that kind of early wow moment that kind of gets users kind of really bought into a system. Like, what would your advice be for kind of teams to try and find that early in a project?
Yeah, so that's probably related to our kind of consulting discussion just now. It's really about understanding the pain points very deeply and understanding what the real problem is, because then you can guide people to the wow moment, right? So if you have, I don't know, some end user and they have a very deep expertise and they have this one problem that they always run into, and there's this like one thing that always goes wrong. If you can guide them towards the like, hey, actually we fixed your hardest problem as quickly as possible, then you just get massive buy-in. And very often, like the end users that, if you're an AI developer or AI engineer, you're building for these end users, they tend to be AI skeptics. And they also tend to have a very poor understanding of what AI can and cannot do, and maybe have unreasonable expectations as well. So we get a lot of people, asking a RAG system like, what's in the data, which is not really a RAG problem, right? It's sort of like a meta problem on sort of the data that's in the data store, but like a real RAG problem would be like, what is the profits of this company in Q3, and that's captured in the data somewhere. So I think if you can guide people in the right sort of way to getting the value within sort of the boundaries of what your system is designed to do, then you can really get them to be your champions.
Yeah. Okay. And thinking about like the process of building a startup in the AI space, like what was the kind of hardest thing that you found going from kind of research at Meta to CEO of a high growth startup?
Yeah. So for us initially, it's probably still true, maybe slightly less so now, but like the technology was not as mature as we thought. And so there were really kind of basic things wrong with certain libraries that had like bugs in their attention mechanism implementation that we found along the way. And so it's really because of the speed in which this revolution is happening, a lot of the underlying infrastructure technology is still very brittle. And so that was really a big surprise to us, and something we had to overcome and kind of build our own solutions for much more than we expected. So that was kind of a kind of negative thing we didn't plan for. Because the other thing that's a more positive thing that happened was that when we started the company, there was no real llama or anything like that. So there wasn't a good open source competitor to a lot of this, or like a DeepSeek, for example. And so now, at least there are very good kind of open source initializations for companies to train their own specialized models on top of. So Llama itself is not nearly as good, obviously, as OpenAI or other models. But if you train on top of that base model for a specific specialization, then you can actually beat OpenAI models at that particular thing. So not in general, but at that particular thing. And so that I think is really good for the broader AI ecosystem, and we've definitely benefited from that.
And how do you balance kind of shipping production with the kind of speed of research in the space? I guess there's always a trade-off there, right?
Yeah, it's never easy to find the right balance there. So we're really like a research-focused company, really research-led, always trying to be at the frontier in our specific area of focus, right? So not in general, but around making Gen AI work on your data. That's what we have, I think, one of the best research teams in the world for. And so, obviously it's not blue sky kind of anything goes research. It's really slightly more applied to real problems that we're seeing with real customers. But I think that's actually much more fun than just kind of like coming up with random ideas without real applications for them.
I thought it'd be an interesting culture question to ask you, because you've hired, like, as you mentioned, kind of top tier researchers, but then you've also got, enterprise operators, for want of a better word, with like serious pedigree behind them. Like, how do those kind of two worlds come together? Is it kind of seamless, or do people want different things at different times?
I mean, and I think any startup founder who would tell you it's seamless is lying.
Yes, no startup ever going to be seamless, I guess.
Yeah, nothing is seamless in startup world. Yeah, so I mean, it's that's always kind of. I think just like with anything in life, especially in startups, I think it's about finding the right balance between all those different kind of competing interests and directions you can take the company in. And so it's just really important to be transparent and have open discussions about those things. And then I think you can do a good job in finding the right balance.
In terms of kind of location, as you've started to grow the company, so you've got offices in New York and London and SF, is that right?
Yeah, so we're mostly in the Bay Area. So we have especially our sales team is a bit more kind of globally distributed, but almost everybody else is in the San Francisco Bay Area.
And obviously, just generally speaking, in the AI industry, like there's a huge pull towards San Francisco. Like, how do you think about that in terms of the trade-offs of kind of competition for a kind of a small pool of people versus, the benefits of the events and everything else that goes on in SF?
Yeah, so it's a small pool of people, but it's also the biggest pool of such people anywhere in the world, right? So,
Yep.
so the density is also here. I don't know. I think for me, I lived in New York before and in the UK before that, and so the Netherlands originally, Silicon Valley, and so that includes San Francisco, but just kind of like, so this area is just special. It has the right kind of mix between capital, venture capitalists who are real VCs, so they basically buy into ideas and not into numbers. And then combining that with extremely high talent density and just lots of talent. And then if you put that together with some of the best schools in the world, then you just get this really interesting mix that I think is just very hard to replicate anywhere else. And lots of places have tried and sort of claimed it, like from Austin and Seattle and New York and other places, but I just don't think those other places are even close, unfortunately. So now that I live here, when I didn't live here, I was like total bullshit. Like
Very different view.
You can do this anywhere else. It's nothing special. And now that I'm here, I'm like, okay, I kind of get it. Like what people have been saying, it really is different.
And in terms of kind of growing the business, like you've gone down a kind of an ecosystem play, like partnering with the likes of NVIDIA and Google and Snowflake. What was the kind of main motivation for that?
Yeah, so for us, we just want to make sure that our technology is available to everybody, and the way to do that is to work through partners who have much bigger distribution than we do. So it just made a lot of sense for us to partner with, companies like Snowflake, where they already have a lot of the data in the right place, and we can just help get more value out of that data. So that's kind of a nice win-win situation.
And kind of leaning on their kind of credibility as well, I suppose.
Yeah, a little bit, and then leaning a little bit on our technology.
And then kind of final question, just as a kind of a general principle, like how do you go about selling like a highly technical product to, maybe non-technical C-level execs? Like what's the kind of key cut through there?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't think anybody has really perfected that. Again, because the market is so diverse, you can actually have sort of non-technical C-level people who have a very deep understanding of AI concepts. So it used to be when we started the company that I had to explain what RAG was. And now if I go like, do I need to explain what RAG is? They go like, are you kidding me? But these are like non-technical people, right? So I think just a broader kind of knowledge of people in those positions, because they've been looking at AI for like 2-3 years now, is actually quite deep. So you can have pretty technical discussions with them. But obviously, so the main thing they care about is ROI. So it's like, how do I move beyond all the kind of demos that I've done, or like the kind of early production systems that we've built that looked great, but now nobody's using them, to actual like deployments that are getting used and that are adding value. And I honestly thought that this might be sort of the year of reckoning for that. But now that we have agents that kind of reset the clock a little bit, where people are like, well, we have more time for experimentation because like agents, that's the new thing. So maybe the year of reckoning is next year. We'll see, but it's definitely coming at some point.
And maybe there'll be a new thing that we can all talk about next year as well.
Yeah, maybe at some point we really need to deliver value. But I don't know. I like I said when we were talking about AGI, I think AI is already delivering a ton of value. I use it every day myself, and you can just clearly see how amazing this is for how we work. So I think there's exciting times ahead, especially when agents start becoming more robust and less brittle. It reminds me a little bit of the early days of RAG, where we had these solutions and you could kind of see the potential, but it wasn't quite robust enough yet. And I think the same is true right now for agents. But when they do become robust enough, that's going to unlock a whole new set of use cases that are probably much more valuable than the old set of use cases.
Great stuff. Well, I really appreciate you coming on today, Douwe. If people want to get in touch and discuss Contextual, like where do you live? Are you Twitter, LinkedIn, email? What's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, all of those. So you can find me on Twitter, LinkedIn. There's only one person in the world with my name, so it should be easy to find. And if you want to see more about the company, contextual.ai is a good starting point.
Great stuff. Well, thank you for your time, and thanks to everybody watching, and stay tuned for the next episode of AI People coming soon.